Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to the Casual Wargamer. Today, I am starting a short series about the various editions of 40k. These are only sort of like brief, bit of fun topics. Today, as the heading says, it's Rogue Trader and Second Edition. When I wanted to get into hobby gaming, it was actually through role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons and the like. But unfortunately, at the time in my teens, I didn't know anybody that played, and so I was kind of waiting on that, I suppose, to find somebody that actually played it. When somebody came to my school, joined our class, it turns out he was a role player as well, but he didn't play D&D. He played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, amongst others, which was published by Games Workshop and set in their Warhammer Fantasy Battle universe. So I started playing with that. And it wasn't long after that Games Workshop announced in White Dwarf magazine a new war game, skirmish game, which was Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. It's probably going to be the wrong way around on here because, hey, that's my phone camera for you. This is not my original copy. My original one fell apart. The binding came undone after about 2 years. This is my third copy. I'm not sure what happened to the second one. I think, again, it fell apart. But the information, the previews that Games Workshop put out in White Dwarf had me hooked instantly. Loved the concept that they were throwing out. I mean, I've always liked monster movies, fantasy, sci-fi. So this sort of Rogue Trader sort of hit the buttons, all the right buttons. So we went down to Games Workshop's Games Day 87, which was held at the Horticultural Society in London in 87. And I still have my little flyer, little pamphlet thing for the day, which is one of my treasured possessions of gaming. But most importantly, on this particular day, I got my first copy of Rogue Trader. I picked up the original plastic Space Marine box set and the original metal Space Orc box set. And my friend and I played this for a couple of years on and off. He had a variety of minis. Neither of us had particularly full armies. Initially, I went with Space Marines because they are my favourite. That's what I love in the lore, especially back then. But I could never make my mind up what I was playing. I ended up painting some as Blood Angels, Ultramarines, Silver Skulls, Mantis Warriors, I think it was another one that I liked the colour scheme of. Before I ultimately settled with the Realm of Chaos books, which I'll come to, on Black Legion. And my friend had, as I say, a variety of models. He had a small Eldar force, I think a few Space Marines, and a few random other things. But I absolutely fell in love with this. Not so much the rules system now. In hindsight, the original system, while the foundations of what we play now are there, quite frankly, the rules system is awful. It's very badly written. It's it's based heavily on the third edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles rule system at the time, and about 10 years ago, I would guess, I actually got to play a game of third edition Fantasy Battle, and my word, it was bad. But it wasn't the rule system that really grabs. If you're like me and you remember these times, it's the lore that the original Rogue Trader universe had, because it's almost nothing like the current 40k universe. Rogue Trader was very much a tongue-in-cheek style game. The universe of it was very much a combination of sort of like Judge Dredd, 2000 AD, the comic. There's a lot of strange references. I mean, orcs were originally based on football hooligans, soccer hooligans, if you're American, which was a problem at the time here in the UK. Um, Gazgul Thrucker, when you take the whole name, was meant to be a bit of a take on Margaret Thatcher. And there's various things like that that were just sort of dropped in. The planet Birmingham, the Black Planet, because it was so boring. And you probably won't get that reference if you don't live in the UK, but Birmingham, very boring. But the universe was again very, very different. The Eye of Terror, for example, didn't really exist. Initially, it was just a warp storm that cut off, I forget the name of the planet, but on that planet was the city of Hell's Reach, and there was like punk gangers with Mohicans, slavers that would sell people to orcs. There's a little cartoony picture of a pair of space marines basically arresting one of these punks with a Mohican for spraying Marines Go Home on the wall. Stuff you wouldn't see in the universe at 40k now. There was no reference to Chaos as yet. That didn't turn up until Realms of Chaos came out. And in fact, there are other things like that. Leman Russ was just an Imperial commander. There was no Primarchs at the time. And there's a whole one of the other things that shows the difference between the current universe and the very original one. There's a whole table in the back of this for scenario ideas, because Rogue Trader was not intended to be played as a war game in the way that 40k is now. It was meant to have a games master who would come up with a scenario, give you your armies and any subsequent rules that might come up, and you would play that. Obviously, that kind of went the way of the dodo, and it became really, by the end of its lifetime, going into second, it had really become a war game in its own, in its own right, or skirmish game, depending on how you want to view it. But some of these ideas would never fly in the game now, in the universe now. For example, your game could be that the planetary governor's daughter has been abducted by Chaos Space Marines, and so he's hired a bunch of orc mercenaries to go and rescue her. Sort of stuff that doesn't happen. Now, you could reverse it. It could be abducted by orcs, and he's being very naughty and paying off renegade Space Marines, Chaos Marines, in goods and slaves to go and get her back. Very odd sort of backgrounds that would have worked back then. And it's that sort of thing that I think still has me looking at Rogue Trader with rose-tinted glasses. It wasn't a good game system, but the universe was fun. It was very silly. I'll say it was very tongue-in-cheek. It was kind of a is pastiche the right word? I'm not sure. It didn't take itself seriously like the game does now. As I say, there was no mention of Chaos in this. There was no Tau Empire. There was no Necrons. The Tyranids were basically a monster in the bestiary. They weren't anything major at the time. And there was no Chaos until you got the first of two books called Realm of Chaos. I think it was Slaves to Darkness was the first one, and I can't remember the name of the second one off the top of my head. But the first book gave you Black Legion, World Eaters, and Emperor's Children. It laid out the Chaos Gods in basic, primarily focusing on Khorne and Slaanesh. You had rules for Grey Knights, which were introduced, and it introduced the Horus Heresy and Primarchs. In a throwaway sort of reason to explain why there is chaos now. It's one of the reasons why I find people's love of Horus Heresy, the novels and the game and thing, a little bit weird, because it was never intended to be this massive thing. It was just a throwaway something to shoehorn chaos into the game that wasn't there already. The second Realm of Chaos book gave you Nurgle and Tzeentch and A Thousand Suns and Death Guard and their own rules. And it was kind of odd because the two books were not similar at all. If the second one had been like the first one, it would have been great, but it's different artwork, different style, different, didn't really work. But we had fun with it. Rogue Trader was always a laugh. My friend and I helped out at our local Games Workshop store. We helped out during the grand opening and everything. We got ourselves sort of like ingratiated in, I suppose. I ran demo games. And we knew things were coming to an end because I can remember talking to the area manager at the time, who gave away something that he probably shouldn't have done in hindsight, and basically said that the game was changing. Games Workshop was changing. Because they weren't interested now in the players that already had armies, that already spent money on the game. They were interested now in the new blood, the people who didn't play, the young people, children and teenagers, which in a little way reminds me of how Warhammer Fantasy was treated where it came to transitioning into Age of Sigmar. And it's a bit of a shame, really. But at the same sort of time, my friend went off to university and all my other friends were role players. So for several years, I was a D&D player. Didn't pay 40k, didn't really keep up to date on it. But I still think back to Rogue Trader. I got great memories of games and the books and stuff. The lore was very different. The original Deathwing novel, which I think was one of the first 40k novels, explained that the Dark Angels are all Native Americans, and the Deathwing themselves came from that particular group of Dark Angels who come to this their recruitment world to find it overrun by gene stealers, and they painted their armor white to symbolize, that their people were dead and go off and hunt the gene stealers. Again, very different to the lore we have now. But I say, I have great memories of this game, but I really do know that I am looking back at it with rose-tinted glasses. But in that bracket afterwards, we had second edition. And I only know some of this because another friend's little brother had the second edition box set, which was Orcs and Marines. Because I remember very oddly that the Orc side, they didn't even give you a killer can. It was a cardboard cutout with a slaughter base, which technically by Games Workshop's own wording is still perfectly legal for play, because they say that models can be played using the bases that they were purchased with. Don't think anyone would go with that now, but hey ho. And it was a number of years back now, probably I'd say about 10, 15 years ago, that I picked up a copy of the second edition rules. And quite frankly, all I can say from here is I've never played second edition, but that was an awful, awful rule set. I know, again, there are people that love it, people that really like it. But for me, it was just atrocious. You could really see that they had taken the basic game and they'd made it just weird and odd, presumably in an attempt to make it appealable to children and teens, who they were, as I say, at that time wanting to focus on them getting into the hobby rather than everybody else. And I've seen a few battle reports. I think Guerrilla Miniature Games did some a few months back, where they did sort of like 40k through the ages. They did Rogue Trader, second edition, and a few others. So I can't really say a lot about second edition. All I can say is that from having read through the rules and watching a few battle reports recently, to me, it's probably the worst edition of the game we've ever had. Sorry, second edition fans, but that's it. So yeah, but one thing you can say for second edition, you were seeing the formation of the universe, the lore that we have now. The only other weird thing that happened in second edition, which I'll touch on briefly, was the lack of the grimdark paint schemes. Now, I don't know whether this is true. I think it's slightly apocryphal, but there may be some truth to the matter. But I remember talking to somebody at a Games Workshop, a member of staff who'd been there a while, and asking about that. And their response was that supposedly one of the named, the well-known, famous member of the heavy metal team actually had in their contract something about that they owned the models that they painted. And when they left the company, they took all their models with them. So Games Workshop basically had to rush paint a load of models for the new edition. And the easiest way to do that was have them be these bright colours. As I say, I don't know the truth of that. Part of me wants to believe it, but again, I think it might have just been an easy way of getting new players, children, teens, painting and playing, and then building up everything else. So at this point, this is the end of my first video. In a few days, I will do 3rd and 4th edition, and we'll see what my thoughts and memories are on that. What do you think? Did you play Rogue Trader 2nd edition? Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm right on my views on this? Do you still have the same rose-tinted glasses look back at these rules and these games? What were your armies back then if you started with either of those editions? Let me know. I'd be very, very interested. In the meantime, please give me a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. I could do with a few more subscribers. It would be nice. Get a few more viewers. And until next time, guys, take care. Good gaming.